Thank you for joining us today. I've got the pleasure of having Andrew Berkowitz, who is the founder of TeamSnap, a company that he founded, grew, successfully exited. He's now the current founder of Suggestion Ox, which is a platform for collecting anonymous feedback for companies and associations and government agencies. Also, Andrew is just all around a cool and impressive person who can deadlift a car probably and make jokes while doing it. So did I nail it? Have I nailed you, Andrew?
You nailed it. You probably made me sound more competent than I am. I like to say that I'm mediocre at a whole wide range of things.
I would beg to differ, but I also sort of identify with that. Always having wanted to be like a specialist who was like amazing at one thing. I am also mediocre at a lot of different things, including video podcasts, as you will see. Let's start talking about TeamSnap first, because one of the things that I'm interested in is you took an idea, built an entire big company out of it, and then successfully exited to go on to do your next thing. Like, what was that like, and how long was that process for you?
Sure. So that was never the plan. So back in the mid 2000s, some friends and I were running a web design firm, and those were the days of we could charge $100,000 to do a 2-page brochureware site. I mean, basically the kind of thing that you could do on Squarespace today for $25. But it was such the early days that nobody knew how to do websites, and we did. So at one point, we all played soccer, and there was kind of no software to manage your soccer team. So we're like, well, we know how to write software, so let's go ahead and write some software. So we created this web app called TeamSnap, and this was so early in the game that you could just like email a prominent blogger and say, hey, we made a web app, and they'd be like, cool, I'll cover it in my blog, because that rarely happens. And so it just sort of grew through word of mouth and a little bit of sort of blogger juice. And we had no idea that this was going to turn into a major business. Like our hope was that we could make enough money that we could take on fewer web design clients. But kind of, as these things do, one thing led to another, and it grew from 4 people working out of their garages to a company of 150 people.
Was there a point in those early days where you were like, you had to make a decision, where you had to be like, we're going to intentionally grow this? Or was it that organic? Was it just like this just sort of happened and one day you have a company of over 100 people?
So we got to a point where it was clear that the opportunity was there, that we were probably going to have to drop the web design thing. I mean, we didn't want to do them both. And for us, the inflection point was taking money. We eventually brought on a CEO because none of us really knew how to run a business. So we brought on a CEO. He was Harvard Business School trained. He immediately went out and started raising money from his business school friends. We got an initial angel round from them, and then sort of once we validated that we could put the money to work and start growing, then we went out and got a venture round and eventually multiple venture rounds. And for me, I was completely new to that whole world, the angel world, the venture world, the fundraising world. So I'm glad we had our CEO to shepherd us through that. I think knowing what I know, it's funny because after going through that, there's definitely pros and cons of taking money. And after going through that, sort of my answer was, well, I'm never doing that again. We're going to bootstrap the next thing we do. So naturally, we're a few years into Suggestion Ox now. We're basically at the inflection point where we're like, well, maybe we'll take some money. So it's easy to say bootstrap, but then, if you want to go fast and really attack an opportunity that's out there, sometimes taking some money to accelerate makes sense.
Right. I mean, that's the main reason, right? It's hard and slow to do it on your own. What was exit like for you? Like it sounds like there was a bit of a transition, like role wise, right? You went from being like the scrappy team to bringing on the CEO, and I think you were creative officer or something like that. Was it a slow sort of transition for you, a slow exit?
Yeah, so I did everything at TeamSnap over the years. I mean, I started out, I was literally our first coder. I wrote TeamSnap 1.0. My sort of the guy who ran our web design firm was a designer, so he did the design. I did the coding. Eventually, he left, so I took over design for a while. Pretty soon, once we started hiring developers, they figured out that I was a terrible developer because I was just self-taught. I mean, I literally never took a programming class. I taught myself in the very early days of the web, so they kicked me out of the code base. And so from there, I ended up running the engineering team because I'm pretty good at people leadership. Ran design for many years, ran QA for many years, ran product. I was chief product officer for a few years. But sort of every time we grew, we'd hire somebody who actually knew what they were doing, and we'd sort of kick me into another role. And by the end, my title was chief creative officer, which meant I kind of oversaw not just the design team, but also really the voice of TeamSnap, and really making sure we were speaking both visually and sort of in writing with a unified voice. And then really my unofficial title was Minister of Culture, and my passion is about building really humane companies that are great to work for. So at the end, I was mostly focusing on culture and just trying to make sure it was a place that people loved working.
Yeah. So you transitioned from TeamSnap to SuggestionOx, and how did that happen? Was SuggestionOx just like an idea that was out there? Like, was
Yeah,
it a similar process to getting TeamSnap going?
I never answered your first question. So
That's okay.
So I actually started building SuggestionOx in 2011 while I was at TeamSnap because, like I said, they kicked me out of the code base. So I wanted to. I've always enjoyed programming, so I wanted to have some kind of side sort of thing I could do to keep my hand in programming. So I started building SuggestionOx just kind of as a fun little side hustle. Although it wasn't even a hustle in the early days, I wasn't charging money for it. So basically, for the first 5 or 6 years, it was just something I would hack on for fun. It actually grew just organically through search engine, stuff. And around 2016, I was like, well, it's a little bit of trouble. I'll probably just shut it down. And my girlfriend actually said, well, why don't you try charging money for it? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't think anybody will pay money for this. They've been using it for free. But I sent out an announcement to customers that we're going to start charging money for it. And enough people paid for it that I was like, oh, this is a thing. So I really just kind of kept running it as a side project while I was at TeamSnap. And, I hired one part-time person to run support. So essentially I didn't have to do anything. I mean, I could go months without, doing any coding, doing any design, just let my support person answer the support emails. And so it just kind of grew organically. Around 2020, I took a sabbatical from TeamSnap for 3 months, came back for a week, and then retired because I just decided I'd had enough of. I was just sort of ready for a change, and nothing against TeamSnap. I was just I'd been doing it for 13 years. I was ready for a change. And then about 4 or 5 months after that, TeamSnap actually had its exit, which I didn't know at the time that we were so close to the exit. So TeamSnap basically had its exit. Most of the leadership team left, and at that point, I was like, well, what do I do now? Am I retired? Am I really retired? And
what does that even mean? Like, yeah.
I mean, I was 52. That seems super boring. So I turned my attention to TinySeed, to SuggestionOx. We took a little investment from a accelerator called TinySeed. I brought in a friend of mine who'd been sort of hacking with me on it as a co-founder, and we rolled from there. So it sort of went from being a side project to a main project.
I know you've played around with pricing quite a bit. You already mentioned that, you weren't charging anything, and you started charging, but I also think you've played around with the pricing model a lot. Is that right? How have you tuned that, and how have you adjusted? What information were you using to make those changes? Besides, people might pay for this.
Yeah, so pricing is interesting. And when we joined the TinySeed Accelerator, the first thing they said to us, and really the thing they say to everybody in that program, is raise your prices. They focus especially on business to business SaaS, software as a service. And most bootstrap founders underprice their business software. We tend to, and this isn't, we tend to price things based on what we would pay as individuals, not really understanding that companies will pay a lot more. And, companies are paying based on value. So our initial pricing at Suggestionox was really based on the hypothesis that it was kind of going to just be individual software that individuals would use. So our initial pricing was like $9, $29. Our top plan was $49 a month, which is great if you're like an individual who just wants a suggestion box for friends to tell you what to do. But for a company, especially for an enterprise level company, we came to realize that the value we were bringing was empowering communication within your organization that was literally going to like keep people from leaving the company. If you could have that candid conversation with your leader, it was going to keep you from walking out the door. So that's really valuable to a company. And, $49 does not capture the value of keeping somebody who's making $100,000 or $200,000 a year from leaving the company. So we raised our prices considerably over the last year. And again, I was like, nobody's going to pay these prices. And, we were convinced that, if we can keep 25% of our customers, we'll be okay on the price raise. And it turned out that most people stayed. Businesses will pay much more for quality results. And in fact, as you start moving up market and you start moving into larger companies, enterprise level sales, there's sort of a minimum price under which you just don't look serious. Somebody who is buying an HR tool at an enterprise level company, if it's $25 or $49 a month, they're going to look like an idiot. So they're
going to think it's not for them.
Yeah, they need to pay more. So it's a weird thing, we certainly don't want to gouge any people, but if you're running an enterprise level company, we are going to save you millions of dollars a year. I mean, we have a calculator on our website that just shows you the cost of turnover. It's really expensive to replace good people, like really expensive.
Especially at scale.
Yeah. If you have good people, do whatever you can to hang on to them, because it's incredibly.
Please keep them. Yeah.
That's one of those. It's sort of one of those hidden costs where it's easy to look at. It's easy to look at sort of top line money out the door expenses. It's harder to look at kind of replacement expenses and opportunity cost expenses. So once you make the case and once people understand, like if I can keep 50 people from leaving my company this year, that's gonna save me like $5 million.
I can pay $100,000 for a tool that saves that or whatever.
Value makes sense. So I mean, this is my advice for everybody I talk to. I mean, I mentor a lot of people who are starting businesses, running solo endeavors. It's always raise your prices. Like as creators, we always underprice. It's just sort of the nature of the game.
Yeah, that's great advice. It's something I know when I talk to like individuals looking for jobs, and they're always sort of undervaluing what their salary should be. So it's sort of, there is an internal process of undervaluing yourself in general, and it applies to your business as well, I guess. Can we talk a little bit about customer acquisition? Because you make it sound sort of magical, and you are magical. But I like, I had this idea. I don't know. I put it out there. It like people found us. Like, is there more? Is there more to it? Has there been a little more experimentation or different avenues that you've gone down?
Yeah. So it turns out there's about 20 different potential channels for acquiring customers. Everything from search engine marketing, just buying Google ads, search engine optimization. For some businesses, it's trade shows. Like that's the main way to. For some people, it's outbound, sales, hiring a sales team and going outbound. And, there's about 15 other channels you can experiment with. Um, it's really hard to know what the right channel is without experimenting. And so you've just kind of got to kind of dip your toe into each channel, kind of waste some money up front. You've got to basically throw some money at it and see what works. So, we've done mostly SEO to this point, which works great if people are searching for what you are. So when people were searching for anonymous suggestion box, like we would pop right up and it was easy for them to find us. As our product has evolved and we've become sort of more of a employee communication platform and even sort of a attrition reduction platform, people just aren't searching for that as much. So, we are now moving into the realm of outbound sales, of sort of working on can we get meetings with larger companies, demo our software, sort of make the case there. We haven't dug into trade shows yet, but it is a process. And generally speaking, you will find 1 to 2 channels that are successful for you, and the rest of them just will not be successful. It also really depends on who you're going after. One of the interesting things about TeamSnap was that we were both business to consumer and business to business. So we made this team software for coaches and managers that was your classic B2C play, where it was literally SEO, search engine marketing. People would come find it, sign up for a demo, try it out, put a credit card in, like no demo, no sales team, no touch whatsoever. But then after a few years, we realized that, really the opportunity was also at the club and league level. And those are businesses, those are organizations. So we needed a sales team to go do outbound sales and go into, a soccer club, a gymnastics club, whatever, and say, hey, we've got this software. We'd love to demo it for you. We'd love to get your board excited about it. So, it's pretty rare for companies to do both B2C and B2B and do it well. So I kind of got exposed to both of those there. So as Suggestionox moves more up market, we're definitely sort of moving towards more of that B2B playbook. But it's all experimentation. Like we have not cracked the nut on it, and it's going to be, I think it's going to be the next couple of years of really figuring out, what is that engine for finding customers.
Have you seen any things that significantly changed in that regard from like the early days of TeamSnap and the early days of Suggestionox? The world has changed quite a bit. And I've heard other agency owners talking about like what outbound sales things like no longer work that used to work really well. And I'm curious if you've seen any trends or any things that have changed for you.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, obviously, as any channel gets more sophisticated, everybody starts doing the same thing, so it becomes more cluttered. So, you get bombarded every day with cold emails, LinkedIn reach outs. I mean, it's pervasive. So all of those channels become harder because people just become more annoyed by it, more jaded by it. So, you've seen that, every time a new social network comes in, it's an incredible opportunity for the people who get in early. TikTok was incredible for the people who figured out TikTok before anybody else. Then everybody figures it out and it becomes much more saturated. The prices go up, the ability to cut through.
Yeah.
Everybody's always looking for that new channel. And I think it's just going to keep being that way. And, as more AI stuff comes online, it becomes easier and easier to create these sort of quasi personalized campaigns through every single channel. So I think all of that personalized multi-channel stuff is going to become less effective just because you're going to see so very much.
You just get flooded. Yeah. I mean, some of the advice that I heard recently was like, it's typical and like boring, but like when you have a targeted solution to somebody's actual pain point, that's the stuff that cuts through. And that's not the stuff that's like you're getting inundated with in your LinkedIn mailbox and in your like email, right? The ones that annoy you are the ones that are like boring and the same and personalized but not really personalized. That's the advice that I have been taking to heart. You mentioned AI.
I'd say the one thing that hasn't changed and probably will never change is the value of word of mouth. I mean, getting a recommendation from somebody you trust, especially somebody in the same industry, will remain gold. And so as we think about our growth channels, word of mouth has been really strong for us. Somebody leaves the company, goes to a new company, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we used suggestion on the last company. It was great. You should use it." So figuring out how to sort of activate that word of mouth is definitely top of mind for everyone. A lot of people try doing, tell a friend, refer us, get a referral bonus, and to some extent, that kind of doesn't work. It's people. If you genuinely solve people's problems and they genuinely love what you do, they will happily tell their friends and their colleagues, because they want to. You want to be a hero. You want to tell somebody about something that's great. So it sounds trite, but part of your growth strategy needs to be building a solution that is so darn good that people can't help telling their friends. If it's tempting to build something kind of mediocre and throw a crap ton of VC money at search engine ads and try to grow that way. That's not really a long-term sustainable solution. Like the best and most successful things are those things that really, really solve the pain points, at least in the beginning. Most things that become big because in the short term, they're really doing something well and really filling a niche. Either they do something just so much better than the competition, or they found a niche that nobody's in. Once you get big, then there's a lot of ways to create beachheads and stuff like that where it's less important. But in the beginning, you got to build something that's better, and it can't be 5% bigger. It's got to be way better.
Way better. Yeah. That hasn't changed, right? That hasn't changed at all. I wanted to switch gears and end talking about company culture, because I know that is an area of particular passion for you, and I know you have a lot of opinions about it. So I'm curious, like, what you've learned on building a positive collaborative culture over your time at TeamSnap and SuggestionOx and all the other places that you had a positive impact.
Yeah. So first of all, we've undergone a huge shift in the employee-employer dynamic over the last few years, and it was starting before COVID, but when COVID moved everything online, it really just we just kind of hit that tipping point. One of the other things that came out of COVID is people kind of took stock of their lives, and they were like, "Ah, geez, what am I doing with my life?" And people now are looking for fulfillment in work more than anything else. You can dangle super high salaries in front of people, but unless they like the culture and feel fulfilled, they're still going to take the lower salary if they can have some more work-life balance, or even just believe in what they're doing. So, the net result is that you have to build a company that people love being at. And for me, the secret sauce of that has always been trust. Build a place where people feel like they have trust, where you feel like you are part of something, you have a voice in the company, that leadership is telling you the truth when it's good or bad. And trust is going both ways. Not only is the company going to say hard things to you, but you're going to have that kind of relationship with your manager where you're going to be able to say hard things. You can go into your manager and say, I'm not happy, or like, I'm thinking about looking for another job, and your manager will be like, okay, well, let's see if we can fix this. That for us at TeamSnap, that was our secret sauce. Trust was by far our number one value. And, everything we did was through that lens. Every communication we made to employees, we were like, are we being honest? Are we being trustful? I'll give you an example is, as a company grows, you almost always have to replace early stage employees with people who have been there, done that. It's just, companies outgrow people and people outgrow companies. And so we had a couple of occasions where, we had to bring in a more experienced leader. Somebody took us from point A to point B, but to get to point C and D, we were going to need to bring in a more experienced leader who had done that. And, the traditional way to do that in a company is you go out, you find that replacement, you interview them in secret. One day you call that, the original person into the room and you say, well, we've replaced you. Thank you for your service. That's not trustful. We would sit down with the initial person and say, hey, you've got to this point, you've done a great job, but we're going to need somebody who does something more. Help us recruit that person. Let's figure out a role for you to continue in the company if you want to. And if you don't, we'll do everything we can to help you find the job you want somewhere else. And, those are not easy conversations, but when you have those conversations and everybody on the team sees that, you don't go behind people's backs to do things and you do things out front, it builds a place where people will run through walls for you. And, it really, I think it showed most strongly for us because we had to lay off half our company during COVID within 4 days. Youth sports basically stopped. I mean, everything
they
stopped.
did. Yeah.
And, our CFO basically sat down with the leadership team and said, we will go out of business if we don't lay off half the company. We cannot sustain this. And so we basically had 4 days to figure out who we were going to lay off. And we went to the company 4 days later and we said, this is what we have to do. And people were so incredibly understanding because we'd been upfront with people the whole time. They could have been angry. They could have been, they could have been sad. I mean, they were sad, but they were incredibly understanding about it. And that was really, it was very moving to me. And, the typical way you do that is you basically, you call everybody in on a Friday and you announce it, and then you immediately shut off everybody's access so they can't do nefarious things. We didn't do that. We were basically like, you're going to have access for the next couple of weeks, so you can, help us wrap up anything that we're working on, so you can continue to communicate with your friends here. You just doing things the right way is not the traditional way and the corporate way, but it's what builds trust. And one of the biggest problems companies have is just communicating with their people. Like either they're not honest, or they under communicate, or they create panic by under communicating.
For sure.
You have a company that's had layoffs every year, and so they say, big announcement coming Friday, and everybody's like, don't do that. So
don't do that. Well, and it's also about you have to create the entire culture of trust so that when those hard things happen, you have that to pull from, instead of okay, I'm going to be really honest, but only when things are bad. And then we're just going to go back to obscuring things and not being truthful the rest of the time. That isn't going to work, right? You're able to go in on those vulnerable situations and say hey, we need to replace you with somebody who is at a different stage of this company, because you've built that foundation of trust the whole time. You're really into improv. You bring improv into a lot of the things that you do, including coaching. We did a little improv exercise, which was hilarious and difficult the other day. How does that play into company culture, and how does that play in? Do you like my pun?
I like it. That's good.
How does comedy sports, how does it play in to the companies you build?
It's a great question. So improv, we like to say, is sort of the art of being okay with just not knowing. And when you think about it, running a company is largely improvisational because you never know what's going to get thrown at you. And, companies try to develop all these playbooks for, what to do, when something goes wrong, but inevitably, that goes out the window as soon as something crazy happens. So, improv is just sort of the art of, being able to respond, gracefully to whatever happens. And really, improv is all about listening. People I always say, like, you should take an improv class, and people go like, well, I'm not funny, or I'm not fast enough. And it's like, it's not about anything. It's not about that. It's just listening and responding honestly. We do a lot of improv training for companies at Comedy Sports. We go in and do applied improv seminars, which are really just that. It's just about sort of listening, accepting, leading with yes. A lot of exercises on, one of the things you see in a lot of companies are just bad communication patterns, where you'll get into a meeting and somebody throws out an idea and somebody else goes, nah, no, that's terrible. Or no, I got a better idea. And, in improv, it's all yes. And we train people to, when somebody throws out an idea, instead of saying, no, that's terrible, you say, yes, that's an interesting idea. And here's how we can make it better. And it's funny, I did for many years, I would do a full improv seminar for the entire company when we'd have our on-sites at TeamSnap. So we'd have, 100 people in the room, and, and years later, I'd still be in meetings with people, and people would say yes. And like, it still resonated. So like, I still recommend absolutely everybody should take an improv class. It's not nearly as scary as people think it's going to be. You imagine that on day one, you're going to have to get up in front of the class and like act out a Shakespeare scene. And it's really not like that at all. If it's a good improv curriculum, it's not scary at all. It's just listening and responding and being honest and laughing a ton. It's an incredible skill. And it's changed me a lot, because I'm a huge introvert, like genuinely very shy, very introverted, but improv has made me very comfortable getting into conversations, getting up in front of groups, the kind of things that, most people would rather die than sort of stand up in front of a group with no script and have to, speak or answer questions. And I'm, after doing improv for 25 years, I'm very comfortable doing that. And it's very much against my nature, I think.
That's funny. I guess that's surprising that you're an introvert, but you're so good in front of groups. Are you going to have to go and take like a nap after we get off this call?
No,
charge your batteries.
One-on-one stuff is fine. I think it's big group settings that are more tiring. But I'm excited to hear when you take an improv class how that goes, because I think it'll change you. I mean, I know I see that expression, like I could never do it.
No, it's funny, because I think, like, I enjoy being on stage. Like, I don't mind. I am more of an extrovert. I don't mind running a big group or talking to a lot of people. But I have never been good at like being spontaneous in that. Like, I'm always very prepared. It's like it prepared in everything. I'm not good when I have to just like do something really quickly. You probably have figured that out about me already. So that's the thing that terrifies me about improv, is like being in front of people and also being unprepared.
But that's what improv teaches you, is you don't need to be prepared, because all of life is improv. Everything
true.
You have no script for your life, and you go through your life just fine. And the funny thing is, one of the classes I do is like, when people get one of the things that people have to learn to do is just make stuff up, because that's what improv is. And initially, people often have trouble doing that, because, especially as adults, we don't feel like we have permission to play make-believe. And it feels like we're cheating if we make stuff up. But when you reframe it as lying, suddenly people become really good at it, because it turns out humans are really good at lying. So instead of saying, all right, you got to get up now and you got to make something up, we just do an exercise where I say, all right, we're going to get up and I'm going to ask you some questions, and all you got to do is lie. And suddenly people can do it. Like, if I want you to make up, like, what did you have for breakfast yesterday? People will be like, oh, let me think. What would be funny? What would be good? Oh, geez, like, I don't have anything. Where you say, I'm going to ask you questions. I just want you to lie. Like, what did you have for breakfast yesterday? People are like, French toast.
Easy.
the cake when you realize it's just that improv is flying.
I love
But
that like one of your like very strong corporate values is honesty and trust. And the way that you get people to sort of loosen up and play within that space is to lie. Right? You've got to.
whatever works. So
Whatever gets us there.
anytime, I mean, I guarantee you, if you take an improv class, A, you'll have a ton of fun. B, it'll be way less scary than you think it is, and C, it'll be much easier than you think, because it's really not about being clever. It's really about being honest. The funniest, best improv is the most honest. It really,
Yeah.
it's not it's not what you think it is.
This is delightful. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time today and going through all of this. This is like fascinating, fascinating information. And I really think like helpful, especially as you're kind of building a company or at any stage in your company, thinking about company culture. You should write a book,
I
Improv and Company Culture.
I have a book on company culture somewhere in my future. I mean, it's hard because it seems so obvious to me, but then I look at other companies and I hear about the crazy things that other companies do, and I guess it's not.
Is there anything you wanted to ask me before we close up here? Always like to give a moment.
No, other than one of my passions is mentoring. I mean, I love teaching. I love helping people. So if there's something that you need or any of your viewers need, like, I would love to have them reach out to me, because I love to, I don't always have the answers, but I'm always happy to sort of knock around different things. So is there anything you need?
Not at the moment, but that makes me want to do the like influencer thing where I say like there will be a link below to Andrew's LinkedIn. What do they say? I don't even know. I'm not cool enough. Like you said, like people needed to understand TikTok. Like I never did understand TikTok. So anyway, we'll put a link to like contact you if people want to take you up on that. And I highly recommend it because Andrew is super smart and funny and helpful. Yeah. So thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much for your time.